Frank is just a good man with a great heart and a willingness to like everyone that comes along.
And it became a very powerful influence in our community, but at the same time, always was family was first. Community was there. I think his belief in God. That kind of person, I don't know if they will make them anymore.
He's extremely honest. He's got a great sense of humor. He's always, whenever you ask him how he is, he's always 100%. That's one of his favorite sayings.
Frank, I believe, was a good blend, is a good blend of taking measured risks, working business to the advantage of the community as well as to himself, and never forgetting a charitable side that makes a community a real community.
He's honest, he's ethical. He has been a person who treasured his family and has great loyalty to his family and to his friends.
Frank Berlin was born February 3rd, 1905 in Kankakee, Illinois. The youngest of two children, his sister was 12 years his senior. When he was 2 years old, his mother was diagnosed with an illness. Doctors did not expect her to live for more than 6 months. His father took a leave of absence from the New York Central Railroad and moved the family to Obar, New Mexico.
We moved to New Mexico for my mother's health in November 1907, and for 6 months.
New Mexico proved to be the tonic Frank's mother needed as she lived to be 95, and his family made Obar their permanent home. Frank's father and mother owned and operated the Berlin General Store in Obar.
My father made a little investment in a retail store, and he retired when he was in New Mexico. After he retired when he was about 75 or 80 years old, I think.
As a young man, Frank loved the outdoors, riding, roping, and cowpoking. Frank became skilled with a lasso. He may be one of the few men ever to lasso a coyote.
I'll tell you what I did. I roped him, and I caught him around the neck. I'd caught, that's the second coyote I roped. The first one I caught, turned around, and bit and chewed the rope. And this one, what I did with this coyote, I got, if you can see it, the rope in the picture. I put another rope after well, when I caught him around the neck, I just drug him to where he was ready, he gave up. And then I put a rope around his belly, and you can see that rope on that picture. And I decided to take him to town, just for the fun of it.
Frank's horse was so well trained he would kneel for him to mount, and he occasionally wore pants. The horse, that is. Well, Frank, too. The fact is, Frank was such an accomplished cowpoke, he even entered a rodeo.
Bareback bronc riding and bronc riding, saddle bronc riding, but I did better in bareback bronc riding. And I entered in Las Vegas, in Garden City, Kansas.
Frank's formal education began in the small town of Obar.
I went to school in Obar, New Mexico, and we had one teacher for all grades.
By the time he started high school, his mother wanted him to go to a bigger school. She had a brother in Duluth, Minnesota, and sent him to the city. Prior to this, Frank had had about a year of high school. In Duluth, he told them he was a senior.
And I entered the 12th grade in Duluth. last year in high school. So in 1922. And I graduated in 23 in Duluth, from Duluth Central High School.
Frank returned home to Obar to run his family's 12,000-acre ranch. In a few months, he realized this was not for him. He discussed the issue with his father.
I'd worked for Liggett Drug in Duluth, and I said, I think I'd like to go back and to get a job in the store and live in the city.
Frank studied pharmacy at the Heinz School of Pharmacy Night School. His first job was with Walgreen, but not as a druggist. He was a salesman.
And my first store was at 43rd and Indiana in Chicago.
Frank's initiative and willingness to accept challenges helped him advance through the Walgreen Company, from clerk to manager, to district manager, to the Southern Regional Manager for a new program of Walgreen agencies. He received this post during a meeting with Walgreen executives in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mr. Walgreen said, Frank, you're a Southerner, aren't you? Would you want to go? Well, I don't know why I said it, but I wanted to go anywhere. I never went back to get my things. I had my steamer truck sent on. I went directly to Dallas. Rented a little office, hired a girl, and set up Walgreen Agency in the South.
Frank's position kept him on the road, traveling throughout the South. One night, while in Dallas, a friend set up a blind date with Frank and Mildred Cantrell. Mildred was the alternative date, as the first girl was much taller than Frank, so his friend switched. Frank thought things went well.
The next time I came to Dallas, I called her and asked her if there was a circus in town. I said, would you like to go to the circus? She said no, she didn't feel good. She kind of had a cold. I thought, to hell with you.
As fate would have it, Frank tried again with greater success. The following March, 1935, they were married.
It's been a perfect marriage. We've never had an argument or anything else.
In 1937, Frank helped an associate purchase a drugstore in Bradenton, Florida. Frank sold him on a new modern store and took him to Chicago to meet the Walgreen executives. While there, his client became so nervous about the purchase, it affected his health. Frank set out to put his concerns to rest.
And I think this guy was just crazy with these shingles. And so I started to sell him. I sat down on his bed and I was telling Max, I said, listen, you're going to do this, you're going to put this store in Braden, it's going to be this successful, and you're going to open another store, and, and all of this. Finally, he said, if you think so damn much of this, why don't you come in with me?
Having recently become a father, Frank thought maybe it was time to get off the road and grow some roots.
I picked up the phone, called my wife in Dallas, and I said, how would you like to move to Sarasota, Florida? And the way my wife says it, she didn't know what I was talking about, but she figured I'd been drinking or something. And so she says, oh, that'd be fine. And I hung up the receiver and said to Max, okay.
On February 5th, 1938, Bay Drugstore in Bradenton was opened. 2 years later, Frank opened his second store, this one on Main Street in Sarasota. Frank's stores were very successful. They were the first stores in Bradenton and Sarasota to have air conditioning and fluorescent lights. No one ever knew what to expect from Frank. He even parachuted Santa Claus from a crop duster onto the roof of his Bradenton Bay Drugstore. Frank's drugstores were only the beginning of his business ventures. Planes were always a part of Frank's life. In 1946, he established the Fly to Fun Florida Airline. He purchased a surplus AT-11 from the U.S. Air Force and flew the plane to Sarasota himself. The plane cost $7,500. It cost another $13,000 to have it certified and refitted for passenger service. Frank's involvement with air travel was an extension of his love of flying.
In his pocket, he carries a coin that was presented to him, I want to say, by American Airlines for being among the first passengers on the first flight from New York to Los Angeles. And that just is another example of his love of adventure, thrill of flying, and really I think he's a barnstormer at heart.
Frank opened the South Seas restaurant, where grass-skirted waitresses would serve you a Coke for a nickel. Frank also started what may have been the first fast food restaurant in the country, the Time Limit Service. Over 50 franchises were sold, mostly in New Mexico and California. In 1944, Frank was elected president of the Sarasota Chamber of Commerce. His vision was a vital part of developing the city of Sarasota.
When he was president of the Chamber of Commerce at a time when Sarasota was a very small town, he had vision to lead the community into major reforms and activities that have had a profound effect on it. The city manager form of government, development of the airport.
Among his many accomplishments during his 2 chamber presidencies, he played a pivotal role in convincing the Boston Red Sox to hold spring training in Sarasota, in establishing New College, and in bringing the YMCA to Sarasota. But one of the most important things he gives himself credit for is convincing Florida officials to take control of the estate of John Ringling. At the time, the estate was at risk of vandals and looting. Frank met with then Governor Caldwell in his cabinet, armed with a series of photographs.
I apologize for taking up their time, but I said, first I'd like to pass these pictures out, and I cut them in 2 just and handed to each side, and I said, you might look at these and pass them down. And then I started to talk, and you'd hear these men, the expression, what in the hell, where is this, you know, and
That meeting would result in the creation of the Ringling Museum. In 1946, Frank sold his stores to Rexall Drugs and moved to California to become a vice president with Rexall. At a special chamber dinner to honor him, the Sarasota Herald-Tribune printed a special edition, which was distributed at the dinner. During his tenure in California, Frank commuted to Sarasota regularly. In 1947, he became owner and president of BMAC Plastics in Los Angeles. With Frank's guidance, it became one of the most successful mold injection plastic businesses in the country. In 1948, Frank created the Payless drugstores in the Tampa area. He later sold those to Jack Eckerd, who used them to begin the Eckerd drugstore chain. Frank created a mail-order business, Carol Beatty Incorporated, named for his daughter. The idea came after his mother had given him his father's pocket watch. Being in the plastics business, he made a special case he called the Treasure Dome and offered it for sale through mail order.
I may be using this loosely, but I don't know. But I believe you would find I made $1 million on that Treasure Dome in less than a year.
Frank also spent his Sarasota time wisely. In 1951, he developed River Forest on Philippi Creek, followed by Saddle Creek, and then Myakka Valley Ranches. Throughout the years, Frank Berlin has assisted many, not only in business ventures, but he has been instrumental in many worthy organizations, providing vital assistance to the YMCA Foundation and hospice.
He's a very active member of our Board of Trustees, and in that regard, our latest project has been, of course, to build the Southeast Branch YMCA. Frank and his wife Mildred have been extremely generous to that project. A wing will be named for the Berlins, which is certainly appropriate.
He got interested in hospice and gave a challenge gift of some $25,000 or $50,000 to hospice to get their foundation started.
Not only did he start the foundation, but he is also the lead contributor for what we are currently building in 1994, hospice houses that house terminally ill individuals.
He just always has a laugh, and he's just really a super nice person.
Frank Berlin Sr. has been a successful and respected businessman, father, husband, and philanthropist. A man who never stopped working or caring about others. He says the key to success is hard work, a willingness to take chances, and never giving up.
There's very few things they're liabilities, I'd call them, but you can't, if you think hard enough and look at the chances are you can make a tremendous asset out of it.